Hello, I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Peaceful Life. I also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. If you're joining me on Facebook, if you have a question, just kind of send it over my way and we'll try to get to them. Well, today's episode we're calling Law and Order. And you know what? Because I'm a native New Yorker, I now live in Florida, of course, that's where Peaceful Life headquarters is. But I was born and raised in Brooklyn, raised my family in Staten Island. I'm about as, thorough as a New Yorker as you can have. And for me, if you watch the Republican National Convention, I was thrilled to see the topic of law and order handled by Rudy Giuliani and Pat Lynch. All right. And the reason why I was thrilled is because it has been breaking my heart of these riots and the destruction. Even in New York, all right, Mayor Giuliani, when he was our mayor, you have to understand, before he took over, we had, of course, a Democratic mayor named David Dinkins there. And for 8 years, he drove New York into the ground. If you went to Times Square or to Broadway, oh my gosh, the porno shops, the slutty places, and the people handing out papers, inviting men to come watch these girls and want to be with a woman, and it was terrible, terrible. You felt like you couldn't go to a Broadway show without being accosted like this, and the hookers were all over the place, and there was graffiti. Some of the subway cars had so much graffiti on them, you couldn't see out the window. In came Mayor Giuliani, and he was elected. He served 2 full terms. Before that, he was a DA, district attorney. And oh boy, did he clean up New York, all right? The graffiti went away because of laws he encouraged the city council to pass. We actually had to lock up all our spray cans. You had to be over 21 to buy a can of spray can paint. It was wonderful. It was all under lock and key. And he had people that were caught doing graffiti. Guess what? They had to serve community service, cleaning graffiti off of buildings and subway cars. So it was amazing. Anyway, now we have this defund the police thing. So what I'd like to do is, just for a minute, in case you missed it at the Republican National Convention, I want to play a clip from Mayor Giuliani's speech. So let's listen to Mayor Giuliani. I can't hear it.
Speak, Janet.
Sorry, looks like they're having some technical difficulties of listening to Mayor Giuliani. So if that's the case, unfortunately, you can't hear everything he said. And if we can fix it before the end of my broadcast, we'll play it for you. So the point I'm making here is that this defunding the police is terrible. Now in New York, they have another mayor now. His name is Mayor de Blasio. Terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And one of the first things he did this summer, with all the rioting and everything going crazy and the chanting of defund the police, guess what he did? He took an entire segment of the New York City police department, and he defunded it. Said, oh, we don't need special task force. We're going to get rid of it. We are going to get rid of it. Okay, so now New York City, since he did that, and he's cut down overtime for cops, he's slashed the budget for the police in New York. Guess what has happened? Crime has gone way up. The number of murders, shootings has gone way up. New York, you see now homeless people just laying all over the street, people camping out all over the place. Matter of fact, my daughter, son-in-law, my grandchildren live up there, and my daughter said to me, Mom, you're not even going to want to go to the city anymore. It looks horrible with what's going on. He has shut down New York practically, and with defunding the police, the way he's done, it has just been absolutely terrible, absolutely horrible. So how does this affect the election? Well, very simply, if President Trump is reelected, he has said that he will not tolerate defunding the police. In fact, he said any city or state that defunds the police, he will take away funds from them, which I'm like, yay, okay. Now, also another groundbreaking thing, and again, I don't know if we can get to these clips. They're back at the studio, they're having some technical difficulty. But the other clip I wanted to play for you was a very historic clip. And that was Pat Lynch. And now Pat Lynch is a police officer, but he's also in charge of the police union, the entire police union for New York City. And guess what? They have announced something that has never happened except for Mayor Giuliani. When Mayor Giuliani ran, he got the endorsement of the New York City Police Department. But since then, but since then, whenever there's a Democrat in office, they always, running, they always back the Democrat. New York City Police Department, their union always backs the Democrat. Like I said, Mayor Giuliani was the exception. So obviously, they have endorsed Mayor de Blasio. They endorsed 4 years ago Hillary Clinton against, they endorsed Barack Obama. They endorsed the other Clinton, Bill Clinton. That's their mantra. That's how they play. But what has been historic is Pat Lynch, the head of the Police Benevolent Association, their union, spoke at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and he formally announced that the police department of New York City is formally endorsing President Trump for election. I mean, that is just amazing. And guess what? That's been happening now all over the country. The unions that are in charge of, or the different things from locale to locale, sheriffs, whatever it's called in your area of the country, they're all backing President Trump. Why? They want law and order. I love the fact that the president also put an executive order out that said, if you tear down statues and if you create graffiti, if you firebomb and smash and destroy property, you're going to jail. And you're going to get a bigger fine than usual, like it's going to be increased. Well, it's about time, because you know what was happening in these big cities where all this crime was going on? They weren't even arresting these people. The police were told by the mayors, hands off, leave them alone. It's peaceful protest. Nah, you want to see a peaceful protest? Look up pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King. Alveda King is part of our ministry. That's peaceful protest. All right, that's a peaceful protest. And the ability to protest in our country, it's our First Amendment right, but peaceful protesting. Like for every year at the March for Life in Washington, D.C., right? We get close to a 500,000 people show up. The media never reports it, but that's a peaceful protest as we march and people hold signs up past the Supreme Court. That's what a peaceful protest looks like. Peaceful protest does not mean that we loot stores. I mean, did you see those pictures up in Minnesota? Oh my goodness. They were walking, they trashed, I can't say how many Target department stores. And unfortunately, Target's going to now close some of those stores. So some poor people are out of jobs. And the other thing is, a lot of these protesters were not from that city. They were bussed in by people who are supporting all this anarchy, Antifa, and the whole 9 yards. But anyway, obviously, I'm not going to be able to get to those clips, which I feel bad about, but I'm sorry for the technical difficulties back at our studio. But I'd like to bring on right now one of our pastoral team members. And of course, if you have a question for me, just send me your questions and we'll try to answer them. All right. Any question whatsoever. It doesn't have to be about law and order. It could be about the election, whatever is on your minds. I'd love to answer your questions. So right now I'm going to bring to you Brian Kemper. And Brian Kemper is one of our pastoral associates. And Brian is, unfortunately, Brian, we had technical difficulties. We couldn't show.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything. I was
no.
Technical. But I remember the speech.
Okay. So let me just tell you a little bit more about Brian. Brian has been with Priest of Life for a good number of years. He says he heads up our youth outreach, our Stand True youth outreach. But at one time, Brian was a bad boy. Bad boy. Yes, he was bad. Brian, he'll tell you a little bit about it. And see, Brian, you know, he sold drugs, he did drugs. He was a really bad guy until he found the Lord, until he gave his life over to Christ. But before that, he was bad. So now I want you to tell us, Brian, what's your take on these people that, you know, are rioting like this in the street and they're screaming to fund the police and they say they were afraid of the police, they can't stand the police. What's your take on that when you were like a little criminal? Tell us about it.
Oh man, back then I would have loved this, Janet. I would have loved this. But you know, this is the thing that people don't realize is why people hate the police so much. It's usually because you're doing something wrong. Like you said, I was a drug dealer. I was an addict. I was a criminal. My friends and I would have contests to see how much we can shoplift from so many stores. We'd go to the ice rink at the mall and shoot little blow darts at the preppy kids. I tore golf courses apart, stole bicycles, stole everything. I was a criminal, Janet. I was a criminal. And I hated the police because I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to get caught.
Right.
And it was 1987 when I overdosed at a Grateful Dead Bob Dylan concert. Ironically, it was police and first responders that saved my life.
See?
And that got me out of, I was in a phone booth screaming to the operator because I believed the phone had melted into my head. I was so far on drugs that day. And the cops got me and they took me to the ambulance and they took me to the doctor. But, you know, when I finally gave my life to God and realized, you know, just got married eventually, started having kids and realized, you know, the police are there because we need them in our community. Right. We need their help. Not just for that, the fact that they were there to save my life. Here's this criminal, this drug addict, this dealer. They didn't care about that. What they cared about is I was hurting and I was overdosed and I was in a place where I could die. And that's what they cared about. They saw me as a human being.
That's right.
They didn't just see the criminal. They saw me as a human being and they cared for me.
That's right. And you know something, Brian, like people say, oh, but there's some bad cops. Listen, there's a few bad apples in every profession. There's bad teachers. I mean, I was a New York City public school teacher for, you know, how many years? Like a long time, 12 years. And guess what? I can tell you there were some pretty crummy teachers, a few of them. But there were so many of us that were hardworking, caring. And in fact, unfortunately, the unions a lot of time protect the bad apples. And the good apples don't get as rewarded. So yes, every profession has a handful of bad apples. But you don't destroy all the other good that all the other police do.
Nope.
For one or two bad apples. And the answer of defunding the police is so bizarre. Do you notice that some of the biggest Hollywood stars that were chanting in on this and saying, defund the police, defund the police, defund the police, are Hollywood, big rich people who people even like Nancy Pelosi, they all have security cameras in their homes,
gated walls,
security guards. Oh, and then
armed with guns.
Armed with
Security
guns.
guards armed with guns.
They have their own private, like, detectives or people that they hire to keep them safe with guns, armed with guns. And it's the very same people that are chanting, defund the police, take away their guns. I mean, this is insane. Totally insane.
I think it was Alyssa Milano recently who spoke so loudly of that, but then ended up calling the police recently because she saw somebody in a hoodie in her neighborhood or something. Like, they're the biggest hypocrites in the world, Janet. They're the biggest hypocrites.
Exactly.
And you were talking about the protests. Like, that I had Dr. King, Alveda King, call the kids that organized a protest in my town where there was no looting, no spray painting, no burning of buildings, no nothing.
Right.
And the police came up to them and said, "Hey, guys, you're going to do this again. Just give us a call in advance. We'll even close the road down for you. We'll help you."
That's right. Because, again, peaceful protesting is what America has been founded on.
Absolutely.
Free speech. But it doesn't mean free looting, free burning, free all this other stuff.
Throwing frozen water bottles at officers.
Yeah. I mean, what about, I can tell you a couple of sad stories. There was one police officer up in New York. I don't think it was covered on the regular secular media, as President Trump calls them, fake news. A beautiful Hispanic police woman, has single mother with a couple of kids. One of these rioters and one of these people who were anti-police, shouting, screaming. Do you know what they did? They walked up to her for no reason whatsoever and shot and killed her.
Yep.
It's terrible. And did you hear about that on the news?
Oh,
did you hear about? No, of course not. Of course not. So this is such an important election. I'm going to make a plea right now to everyone watching us on Facebook. We have got to vote for law and order.
Absolutely.
We have got to keep our police funded. We have to keep our Second Amendment right to bear arms. Here in Florida, Brian, you can get a gun. And I said, well, you know what? My birthday's coming up. Maybe I should get myself a little gun so I can go with my family to the gun range and just have fun. Because, the way some people go bowling in states where you can have guns, they go as an entertainment to the gun range.
I take my kids to the gun range sometime, yeah.
Yeah.
They learn how to respect them and how to use them right. But, Janet, if people don't vote law and order, guess what? Old Brian, you better watch out, because a lot of old Brians, like I used to be, you better watch out there. Because, believe me, I'd have taken advantage of it. If there's no cops, you better lock your doors and have a gun, because I had to come up and just done whatever I wanted.
Exactly. There's so much at stake. First of all, I want to remind everyone who's watching right now, we have to be praying for this election. And at Priest for Life, we have a beautiful election prayer that Father Pavone has written, and we have little prayer cards. We'll send them to you absolutely free of charge. Just go to prolifeproducts.org and click on, we have a whole banner up there for our election items. Click on that prayer card. We'll send you a stack of 100. Give them out to everyone. Let's everyone be praying every day. We have to pray for our president, and we also have to pray for this election. Okay,
hey,
that's
Janet,
first.
Also, I talked to our screen printer this morning, this coming Monday. The next shipment of Pray for Trump t-shirts ships out. They'll be in the office by Wednesday.
Okay.
So if they want to go order a shirt and show their support for the president, that they're praying for 45, praying for President Trump, the new shipment of shirts gets to the office on Wednesday.
That's right, because he's the 45th president of the United States. So prolifeproducts.org. And then finally, there's such a stark difference. And by the way, I just want to remind anyone, if you have a question for me or Brian, just send it to us through the feed here on Facebook and we'll answer your question. We still have about 10 minutes left, so we can still get to some questions, all right? But we also have a comparison piece done of the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, on about 6 different issues. The first side is in English, the other side is in Spanish. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, there is nothing more dramatic than the difference between the Democrat and Republican Party at this juncture in our history. The Democratic Party thinks that abortion is fine through all 9 months of pregnancy up till birth. Now, if that doesn't scare you and horrify you, and guess what? Some people are saying like, oh, is it really happening? Yes, it is. We have stories and testimonies and witnesses of late-term abortion is happening. Okay, so here's a question. Karen Watson Bastiani, Italiano, she wants to know, how can Biden call himself a Catholic? Well, he's not what I would call a practicing Catholic, okay? He might now this election season show up at church now and then. He might even present himself for communion, and that's really up to his own priest and his bishop to deal with that. However, you cannot support abortion. Cannot, impossible. Nor can you vote for a candidate that is pro-abortion and be a faithful Catholic. So Biden, by supporting, like his party does, abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, claiming it's a women's right, what about the baby's right? He's putting his very soul in jeopardy because God will hold him accountable for all the actions he took to advance abortion and kill unborn children. So he can't be calling him Catholic, but you know what? A lot of people we know call themselves Catholic that are not really practicing their faith. We all have them in our families too, right? I mean, come on. The next time you go to a funeral in your family, right? You're going to see a whole bunch of aunts, uncles, and cousins you probably haven't seen in a long time. And then if there's a funeral mass and you all go into church, how many of your family members are going to present themselves for communion? And the last time they showed up in church was maybe Easter, Christmas, Uncle Joe's, funeral, and maybe Aunt Sally's wedding. So there's always people around us that don't take their Catholic faith seriously. But what we have to do is we have to be serious voters. And when we go into the voting booth, we can't mark that ballot, pull the lever, or whatever way it is in your state to vote for any Democrat candidate right now, only because the party has taken 100% pro-abortion position. So in good conscience as a Catholic, how can you support anybody who wants to kill babies up to birth? So
you can't.
Karen, I hope that answers your question. We should pray for Biden. That's what we should do. Pray for his soul. Pray for him for change of heart. Because you know what I tell people? Listen, if Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who founded the abortion industry, the whole thing, okay, back in the late 60s, early 70s, if he could convert from being a Jewish atheist to a pro-life Catholic, Norma McCorvey, same story. She was at one time a non-believer, and she also converted to be 100% Catholic, 100% Catholic and pro-life. Brian himself here, look at it, Brian. He was a Satan worshiper, and here he is, 100% Catholic. So we need to pray those people back into church, even members of our own family. But meanwhile, we have to get as many like-minded people as us to get out a party, and you know who that is. Okay, here's another question. Wendy Jansen says, do you have a list of famous people that almost got aborted? Oh my goodness, yeah, there are. We don't have a list on our website though, Wendy, and that's a good idea. So you know what we'll do after the election, I'm not promising anything before, but I'll start talking to people we know, right, Brian? And I know
Jason Jones has a list of Hollywood. Yeah, there's a lot of people I know that
there's quite a few people that were almost aborted, and they're thanking God. Actually, isn't it Nick? Isn't it Nick Cameron?
Nick Cannon.
Nick Cannon is one such person. Nick Cannon was almost aborted, but there's more. So Wendy, I like your suggestion. And after we are victorious with Trump and this will be another project.
And we'll look into some of that too, Janet.
Yeah, we'll get the list together and we'll announce it and we'll put it on Priest for Life website. Okay, William Sanchez wants to know, did you ever meet Martin Luther King Jr.? No, unfortunately, I didn't have the privilege of meeting him, but we do work with his niece, Alveda King. I know her mom, Naomi King, who was married, of course, to Martin's brother, A.D. King. And it's a great joy that we have to work directly with Alveda King. I've been actually to Atlanta. I've been to Bernice King's home. She's one of the children of Martin Luther King Jr. And I was at Coretta King's funeral with the family, Father Pavone and I. So I've had interaction with the King family, but unfortunately, I did not ever get to meet Martin Luther King Jr. So, but thank you, Williams, for that question. Eileen Queen, are you going to have a prayer rally soon? Well, there's a lot of groups, first of all, doing prayer rallies right now all over the United States. Excuse me. Some of them are doing rosary rallies, but also let's not forget, we have the 40 Days for Life campaign is currently going on from now to it ends the Sunday before the election. November 1st, it ends on All Saints Day. So you can go to their website, 40 Days for Life, see where the nearest group is to you, where you live, Eileen, and you could join in praying, because nothing is more powerful, excuse me, than praying in front of an abortion clinic. Babies' lives are saved, and they always report all the babies that are saved. So, Eileen, thanks for your question.
Janet, I remember when you were talking about being Catholic and just going to Mass, there's an old joke is walking into church doesn't make you a Catholic, just like walking into McDonald's doesn't make you a cheeseburger.
Right.
There's a little more to just stepping into church, you know.
That's right. And then, Brian, you had done a great meme because, you know, there's this group called Catholics for Biden. Like, I mean, I'm on Catholics for Trump, woohoo, but Catholics for Biden? So Brian did this great meme. It's on our vote prolifevote.com. We have a special web page with tons of stuff up there. But if you click on our social media toolbox, you'll see some great memes that Brian has created. And you can use them. But one of the ones he did was Catholics for Biden is like vegans for
meat.
That was it. Yeah. So check it out. Go to prolifevote.com. Check on our social media toolbox. You'll see a lot of tools there for you. Okay. Jeff Goodman has a question. My friend was raped, beaten, and got pregnant. She had an abortion. Is that wrong or ungodly? All right. Look. The first of all, of course, every abortion is wrong, but your friend, we wouldn't condemn your friend. All right. Your friend did what she had to do at that time because of the trauma. And probably the people surrounding her were pushing her, you know, to have that abortion because they think that having an abortion after being raped helps the woman, solves the problem. But in my book, Jeff, I wrote a book called Recall Abortion. Okay. And if you go to prolifeproducts.org and place an order, I'll send it to you absolutely free of charge. I did a whole chapter in there about rape and incest. All right. And about, there's been studies done of women who were raped and had the abortion, and women who were raped and gave birth to the child. And some of those children, some of them were placed for adoption, but some of those mothers raised those children. And guess what? The women who gave birth never, ever, ever regretted having that baby. They said it was healing for them. But the women who were raped and aborted, they deeply, deeply regretted that abortion because you know why? The rape was one trauma, but then having that abortion right after that rape was a second trauma to them. And they deeply regretted it. They felt responsible for that baby. And so, but the good news is healing is available. And we help run one of the largest abortion recovery programs called Rachel's Vineyard. And you just have to go to abortionforgiveness.com. If you go to abortionforgiveness.com, you can put in your zip code and see where the nearest healing resource is for you. So I hope you contact me. I'll send you a copy of my book. And then look at Rachel's Vineyard resources there for your friend. Again, the Lord always says, go and sin no more, and I don't condemn you. That's so true. and neither do we condemn you. Okay? So I want to thank you, Brian, for joining me. I'm sorry what happened with those beautiful clips. They are on YouTube, though. You can find them on YouTube, and you can find those clips of Giuliani and Pat Lynch if you just Google them. They're from the RNC. Oh, Jeff has another question. When was the last time Trump went to church? Listen, first of all, Trump prays, okay, every single day with his staff. President Trump does. Father Pavone and I know some of the ministers that actually come to the White House on a daily basis and pray with the president. What church he attends, you'd have to ask the Secret Service. And sometimes ministers come and they do church for him right there at the White House with his family. All right, because of the high security. You know, if the president goes to a church, it becomes a big deal. They have to, it almost inconveniences the people attending that service because, like, let's say the church services were 10 o'clock, Secret Service will be there at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and they'll have to sweep the whole place. They'll have to, it's a whole security issue, And so he's actually being courteous for the churches that are in the Washington, D.C. area by having the ministers come to him. But every single day he prays. When he gets up in the morning, he opens his Bible, he prays, and we know the ministers that can vouch for this and tell us, because they come to the White House at his request to pray with him on a daily basis. So the president believe me, you don't say things like President Trump says that say things like every baby is precious in the eyes of God. That doesn't come from a man who doesn't go to church. I haven't heard Vice President Biden say one nice word about an unborn child, and I don't think he ever will. All right, Karen has a question for me. Oh, Karen Watson Bassiani. Guess what my maiden name is, Karen? It's Watson. Maybe we're related somehow. Anyway, the name of my book, my very first book, is called Recall Abortion. And if you go to prolifeproducts.org, our special webpage, you can place an order for that book. And then I wrote a second book about 2 years after that one, and it's called Shockwaves, the Widest Circle of Victims from Abortion. So that talks about the damage. Of course, every abortion kills that baby, but that book talks about it affects the mother, the father, the grandparents, future siblings, the whole family, and society at whole. So that's a nice follow-up to after reading Recall Abortion. And if you mention you saw me on Just Ask Janet, I'll send it to you as a special gift. And then Yasmin writes, Trump cares. Yes, he does.
Yep.
Trump cares. He cares about us. He cares about our families. He cares about our safety. I mean, he really, really, really cares. Well, Brian, I want to thank, any more questions? If not, we're about near the end of our broadcast. So, Brian, thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure having you on, talking about law and order. And let's go elect and re-elect our pro-life president, okay? So just go to our special voting website, prolifevote.com. All the tools you need are there. And don't forget, Brian said, our Pray for 45 t-shirts are arriving this week back at the office. Next week, we'll be happy to send them out to you too. So thank you for joining Just Ask Janet. God bless you. Until next week, this is Janet from Just Ask Janet.
Bye,
I'm
guys.
Pat Lynch, president of the Police Benevolent Association, speaking to you on behalf of 50,000 active and retired New York City police officers. We are the proud men and women who wear a shield on our chest and put ourselves in harm's way to protect our city. We are proud to endorse our president, Donald J. Trump, for re-election because the stakes have never been higher. Like cops across the country, we are staring down the barrel of a public safety disaster. More than 1,000 people have been shot in New York City so far this year. Almost 300 have been killed. These are not just numbers. These are real people. A father gunned down while holding his 7-year-old daughter's hand. A beloved neighborhood peacemaker killed by a stray bullet. A 17-year-old who made all the right choices, who worked hard to go to college and earned a sports scholarship, murdered before he can tell his mother the news. A 1-year-old child shot dead in his stroller. Innocent people, innocent lives lost. One tragedy is too many, but every day the number keeps growing. And every day our communities are asking us, why is this happening? The answer is simple. The Democrats have walked away from us. They have walked away from police officers, and they've walked away from the innocent people we protect. Democratic politicians have surrendered our streets and our institutions. The loudest voices have taken control, and our so-called leaders are scrambling to catch up with them. In city after city, they've slashed police budgets. They have hijacked and dismantled the criminal justice system. They've passed laws that made it impossible for police officers to do our job effectively. Here's the sad truth that every cop in this country knows. The violence and chaos we're seeing now isn't a side effect. It isn't an unintended consequence. It's actually the goal. The radical left doesn't really want better policing. They don't really care about making the justice system fairer. What they want is no policing. What they want is a justice system that just stops working altogether. In places where Democrats are in power, the radical left is getting exactly what they want, and our country is suffering for it. I've been a New York City police officer for 36 years. I've spent 21 of those years protecting the cops who protect New Yorkers. I've never seen our streets go this bad so quickly. I've never heard from so many cops from every corner of the country who are saying the same thing. Our hands are tied. If we're going to turn the tide and restore law and order, we cannot fall into the left's trap. There is nobody who hates bad cops more than good cops. But that doesn't matter to the radical left. To them, we're all just bad because we're all just blue. Their anti-law enforcement campaign isn't about a single incident. It isn't the result of one bad law or one bad policy. It's about a message. The message is police officers are the enemy. The message is criminals have the right to resist arrest. The message is if you commit a crime, if you victimize the most vulnerable of people, the justice system will not hold you accountable. That's the message echoing through city halls and state houses across our country. It's playing on a loop in the media. The criminals have heard that message, and they're taking full advantage. We must stop that message. We must expose the left's lies about police officers and the job that we do. And we will do that because we have something that they don't. We have a real leader. We have a powerful voice in the most powerful office in our country. We have President Donald J. Trump. Unlike the Democrats who are running in fear of the mob in the street, President Trump has never apologized for supporting police officers and standing up for law and order. Unlike the Democrats who froze in the face of rioting and looting, President Trump matches his words with his actions. He gives law enforcement the support and the tools we need to go out there and put a stop to it, period. End of story. It has never been harder to be a police officer in this country, but there are two things that keep us going. We look at the victims, the vulnerable, the regular working people who count on us. We keep strapping on our duty belts and bullet-resistant vests because we know we can't let them down. And while we do that, we hear the words of our president, who says to police officers everywhere, "I will never let you down." We know that he hasn't, and we know that he won't. We've been fortunate to have him in office these past 4 years, and we know that we cannot afford to lose him. When it comes to your safety, your family's safety, and the safety of all Americans, there's no other choice. You won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. We can have 4 more years of President Trump, or you can have no safety, no justice, and no peace.
Well, sorry, everybody, but my tech guys back at the studio were able to get the clip to work so you could hear it. So I know some of you stayed with me even though I said goodbye, because I just got a quick message from Zach, our tech back at the office, and he said, "I got it, Janet, to work." So I said, "Okay, let's go with it." So I hope you enjoyed Pat Lynch. And like I told you, it was very historic. As a native New Yorker, I can tell you, unfortunately, most of the unions in New York, they always back the Democratic candidates. But now the police officers have broken away and said, nope, we're going to vote for the law and order president. We're going to endorse President Trump. So God bless them. I'm waiting to see if Zach, my tech man, were you able to get Giuliani back up for everybody? Let me see. Okay, he's trying it.
Good evening. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm the former mayor of New York City. In 2013, my city elected a self-described progressive Democrat as mayor. New York City, once described as America's crime capital, had become, by the mid-1990s, America's safest large city. Now today, my city is in shock. Murders, shootings, and violent crime are increasing at percentages unheard of in the past. We're seeing the return of rioting and looting. During riots, this Democrat mayor, like others, has often prevented the police from making arrests. And even when arrests are made, liberal, progressive DAs release the rioters so as not to disrupt the rioting. New Yorkers wonder, how did we get overwhelmed by crime so quickly and decline so fast? Don't let Democrats do to America what they have done to New York. Again, the Democrats are urging you to vote for an obviously defective candidate. Biden has changed his principles so often, he no longer has any principles. He's a Trojan horse with Bernie, AOC, Pelosi, Black Lives Matter, and his party's entire left wing, just waiting to execute their pro-criminal, anti-police, socialist policies. The whole unprecedented wave of lawlessness began with a truly just cause: the unforgivable police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Peaceful protests began all over the land. The condemnation of the killing was universal, from President Trump to Democrat leaders. It seemed, for a few brief shining moments, Democrat and Republican leaders would come together with a unified proposal to reduce police misconduct. This possibility was very dangerous to the left. They had a president to beat and a country to destroy. And although an agreement on action against police brutality would be very valuable for the country, it would also make President Trump appear to be an effective leader. They could have none of that. So Black Lives Matter and Antifa sprang into action, and in a flash, they hijacked the peaceful protests into vicious, brutal riots. Soon, protests turned into riots in many other American cities, almost all Democrat. Businesses were burned and crushed, people beaten, shot and killed, police officers routinely assaulted, badly beaten, and occasionally murdered, and the police handcuffed by progressive Democrat mayors from doing anything but observe the crimes and absorb the blows. But the worst of it was the slaughter of innocent young people with their whole lives ahead of them. The murder of 4-year-old LeGrand Talfaro in Kansas City shocked the nation, but not Black Lives Matter or their many Democrat supporters. 17-year-old basketball star Brandon Hendricks was killed in the Bronx just days after graduating high school and on his way to St. John's to play basketball. He passed with only a brief mention. 1-year-old Davil Gardner Jr. was shot and killed in a stroller at a cookout in Brooklyn, and it caused no outrage. For President Trump and for us Republicans, all Black lives matter, and the lives of LeGrand and Brandon and Davil matter to us. All lives matter to us. These continuous riots in Democratic cities gives you a good view of the future under Biden. All 5 of the top cities for homicides, like the top cities for rioting and looting, are governed by progressive Democrats, using the progressive Democrat approach to crime, which is to do nothing substantive to reduce it, to release prisoners, as many and as soon as possible, and to go to war with the police, the only group with the capability to protect your citizens. It is clear that a vote for Biden and the Democrats creates the risk that you will bring this lawlessness to your city, to your town, to your suburb. There is no question that this awesome job of restoring safety for our people cannot be done from your basement, Joe. There's also no question that President Trump will fight with all his strength to preserve the American system of government and our way of life. In critical times in our history, America has always been blessed with the right person to handle the crisis. Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Reagan were perfect for the challenges they faced and brought our nation through gloriously. President Trump, with his boundless love of our country and all our people, his disciplined work ethic, his exceptional ability to inspire, and his deep understanding of our system of government and the strength of American values is the man we can trust to preserve and even improve our way of life. Mr. President, make our nation safe again.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry that we had those technical difficulties earlier, but I hope you're inspired now, and go to our election website, prolifevote.com. Again, prolifevote.com. All the information you need to get involved is right there. We want to hear from you. Thank you, and God bless.